Hey guys, Shalana here. Welcome to the Bingezone. On today's video, we're talking about episode 9 of Lovecraft Country titled Rewind 1921. A lot happened this episode. We time travel back to Tulsa during the massacre of 1921. We also see that Hippolyta's back and we see where Ruby's true allegiances lie. But guys, before we dive too deep in this episode, give this video a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and check out my podcast, the Magical Negro Podcast, in the description box below, where we really dive deep into all things Lovecraft and break down every episode in great detail, so check that out. But without further ado, let's dive into this episode. This episode starts off right where episode 8 ends off, and we find that Dee has been cursed. So the crew's trying to decide how they're gonna help her. Tick thinks that the best course of action would be to call Christina and have Christina reverse the curse. And he's gonna use Thaddeus' page as bargaining chips. But remember guys, last episode, Letty already traded those pages in for her protection spell. So Montrose loses his shit and snaps, and Ruby gets in the middle of Montrose and Letty. So as they're arguing, Ruby's like, you know what, Christina's gonna do this for me. So they call Christina, and Christina says, you know, she can't cure it without the book of names, but what she can do is reverse the spell and give them 24 hours. That's the best she can do. And she'll only do this if Atticus sacrifices himself in the autumnal equinox for her to get herself immortality. And ultimately Tick decides that he's gonna sacrifice himself for his cousin. So Christina says they need to get the blood of her closest relative and she'll be back because she has some business to take care of. And the business that she wanted to take care of was Lancaster. And Christina is petty. Because remember, Lancaster is the one that shot her lover, William. And we finally find out what Lancaster has been doing with that black skin. Lancaster was actually taking black people, their skin, their appendages, their organs to keep his life going. And he was just transplanting them, like I said in my previous video. So we finally got a confirmation to that. It's some real Get Out shit. And I'm like, bruh, he hates black people. He can't stand them, but he loves taking their parts. Like, it's always the same shit. Like, black people are only good for their talent, their skin, with their athletic abilities, whatever, and nothing else for these racists. And it pisses me off so much. But then we find out that he can't heal himself, and that's when Christina comes in. And the thing that Christina had Ruby put in the office was a way to jam his spell, because she wanted Lancaster to die a slow and agonizing death. I told y'all, Christina is petty. So then we find ourselves back at Uncle George and Hippolyta's house, and Montrose has that yak. Like, you know, Montrose is always drinking, so he can't help himself. And that shit is strong, because Tick can't even drink it. But then Montrose goes and tells Tick that he might not be his father and George might be the actual dad, and Tick loses his shit. I mean, we all suspected this as early as the first episode, but for him to tell Tick, and Tick snaps because he suffered years of abuse at the hands of Montrose. And granted, Montrose is my favorite character by far, but that does not excuse all the fucked up shit he did to Tick, all the fucked up shit he did in the previous episodes, killing Yahima. And because you are hurt, and I know hurt people, but violence does not beget more violent. Like, you have to be the one who break the cycle. So I understand Tick's anger and the fact that this was all kept from him. And Letty walks in as this is happening, and they're trying to figure out what the fuck are they gonna do. And then Hippolyta shows up from the future, and my mind was blown because Hippolyta just came from traversing universes. She came from Earth 504, and she spent 200 years there, and she got infinite wisdom. She comes back as a supercomputer, and I'm like, yes, Hippolyta, yes. So with Hippolyta being there, she is Dee's closest blood relative. So she gives Christina the blood to stop the transformation, and we see that Dee was actually becoming a pickaninny girl. But after Christina gives him 24 hours, she says that she's gonna come get Tick later on, and they're gonna go sacrifice him, and she leaves. And Ruby decides to leave with her. So Letty tries to get Ruby to stay, but Ruby actually chooses Christina's side. And guys, I don't know about you guys, but I'm starting to get sick of Ruby shit. Like, granted, I let it slide for the first few episodes because I was testing the waters, but I feel like Ruby is self-centered and Ruby is selfish. Now, I'm not saying there's anything inherently wrong with that because that's a human emotion, but so far, Ruby isn't really for the cause. Ruby isn't really for fellow black people. Ruby's all about self. Because if we go back to the first episode, we go back to the third episode, we go back to the fifth episode, and now this, Ruby's always choosing to be with white people, and she wants to be a part of that society. I don't care what she says. Even at the end of the episode where she tells Christina that she doesn't want to be there because when she wants to be white, she always pictured herself as a redhead. And when she was finally white in episode 5, she decided to go get a job at a retail store. And she decided to keep all that for herself. So I get more into why I dislike Ruby as a character because of her character journey more in the podcast, so definitely check that out in the description box below, the Magical Negro podcast. But back to the main crew, they decide that they need to get the Book of Names in 1921, and Hippolyta says that she can fix the time machine and send them there, and she calculates the exact amount of time it's going to take her to get there, the exact amount of time it's going to take to fix the time machine. And like I said, she is a supercomputer, so she fixes the time machine, and Montrose and Letty kind of have a talk, and Montrose lets Letty know that they know that she's pregnant. And the fact that she chose to save her son's life, she should not be surprised that he's going to choose to save his kid's life. And I feel like Montrose is about to do some shady shit and sell Letty out in the final episode, just because he already laid the groundwork for that in this episode. So when Hippolyta fixes the time machine, she tells them to go there, get the Book of Names, and then make it back in time so they can save Dee with the spells. So Tick, Letty, and Montrose jump into the portal, and they find themselves in 1921. Montrose was having a hard time getting into the portal because, remember, he survived the Tulsa massacre. Like, he was there while it was going on, so he understands exactly the trauma that happened that night. Like, Tick and them might not know what happened, but Montrose was there, and he has to relive the massacre of thousands of black businesses, thousands of influential black people. They called Tulsa Black Wall Street. This was a thriving black economy that racist white people decided to wipe off the map. And you're asking Montrose to go relive that again. Of course he's traumatized. And that adds layers to the character of Montrose, because Montrose as a whole has always been the type that he's rougher on the edges, he's violent, he's abrasive, but that's because of the shit that he had to deal with. And we find out more about the things he dealt with in this episode. And shit, Montrose has been through the ringer. So while they're in 1921 and they're walking around, Montrose is flooded with memories. Tick also remembers all the shit that Montrose did to him, and he bans Montrose from his life. Like, he says after this, he never wants to see Montrose again. You're not my dad, fuck off. Like, he goes off on Montrose. And again, rightfully so, because Tick has suffered so much trauma at the hand of Montrose. This is right. Like, I understand where he's coming from. Even if Montrose is his father, because at this point we don't know, the fact that I have to deal with all this bullshit from you, like, no, fuck that. No kid should have to deal with that. And I love the fact that Tick doesn't want to deal with that at all from Montrose. So as they make their way to Tick's mother's house, and Montrose and Tick's mother grew up next door to each other, we see that Montrose's dad, Burton Freeman, takes Montrose out and starts beating him because he found a flower in his head. And he's beating the living shit out of this boy with a switch in front of everybody. People just walking out. And this is a problem with the black community. When we see things happen like this, we mind our business, but this is abuse, and no one stepped up except, of course, for Tick's mom. Dora comes out of nowhere and stops him. And Montrose's dad actually has the audacity to threaten somebody else's daughter. So when Dora's father comes out and checks Montrose's father, it's like, look at the dichotomy between the two grandfathers of Tick. One of them is an alcoholic who can't even stand straight. He's swinging side to side, and the other is standing up for his daughter. So we see why his mother was able to grow a certain way, and the father was able to grow a different way, and why Montrose is the way he is. So Montrose ends up running off, and Dora confronts George, because why didn't George do anything? And that's another thing with Uncle George. As much as we all love Uncle George has been complicit in a lot of fucked up shit. Like, he belittled and helped Hippolyta shrink. He let Tick get abused for years. He let Montrose get abused for years. Like, Uncle George, there's a saying that, there's an old adage that says, for evil to win, all it takes for good men to do nothing. And Uncle George does nothing. He diminishes women around him in the sense of Hippolyta. He lets his family and loved ones get abused. And he follows his dreams no matter what. Like, it's as though Uncle George is stepping on other people to actually achieve his thing and staying in the background. And I found myself kind of looking at George sideways. But that's just me. And then they turn around and Montrose is gone. Future Montrose is gone. And young Montrose is gone. And Tick and Letty decide that they're going to split up. He's going to go after Montrose and stop him. And Letty's going to get the Book of Names from Tick's maternal grandparents' side. And Letty actually hotwires a car from 1921. And I'm like, yes, I miss this Letty. The Letty that gets down and dirty and gets shit done. So as the sun is setting, Letty gets attacked by a bunch of racist white guys in pickup trucks. And she's running. They're shooting at her. Thank God she has a protection spell and that protects her. But what I love the most about this scene is the fact that Burton and Dora's father come out and they start shooting back. And guys, this is a valuable lesson in how to fight against oppressive races. Arm yourselves, because had they not had guns, they would have died. And the fact that both Tick's grandfathers came out with guns and fought the racists off, like, protect yourselves. This is, America is a Second Amendment country. I'm not pro-gun at all. I actually don't like guns, but if you have them and you have the right to get them and protect yourselves, because that was a shining, proud moment for black people, telling us, yo, arm yourself, protect yourself, fight back, and don't let them walk all over you. So that was great. I love that messaging in this episode. So they take Letty and they bring Letty to the house and they're talking to her, and Tick's great grandmother actually sees that her shoes are different from the people in the time period, so she's kind of skeptical. And then we flip to Montrose and we learn more about Montrose. Montrose at the time had a friend, Thomas. Thomas was his friend that I guess that was his boyfriend, but they weren't really together because of the times. And Montrose had to let him go because after that beating he got from his dad, he had to tell the kid like, yo, we can't be friends no more, get out of here. He called him the F word. And it's like, bruh, Montrose is hurting and he's trying to save Thomas because at this point, Thomas gets shot point blank by some racists. And the fact that that is the very, like, when Montrose expressed his sexuality from the mirror, that very same day, the boyfriend that he had at the time gets shot in front of him, like, he had to suppress who he was, and all he knows is violence. Violence from his dad, violence from racist white people, violence from being who he is. Like, that shaped him, that molded him, that created the Montrose we know now. And he told Tick that he had to bury that part of him. He had to erase Thomas because he had to be a man, and men have sons. So he had to sacrifice all of that to become the father of Tick. So he doesn't give a damn if Tick is his kid or not. He is Tick's father because he raised them, and that touches Tick. That touched me because, again, Montrose is a piece of shit as an individual, but when we understand his motivations, like, it doesn't justify it, but it also makes us look at it and be like, yo, Montrose never stood a chance. This world never allowed him to actually stand a chance, and that's the part that I find so touching about this moment. Before future Montrose can interrupt Thomas from dying, the racist whites come up and they shoot him in the head, and he just dies, and Montrose has to relive that again because the younger Montrose relived that, and the older Montrose had to watch that happen. It's like, yo, double the trauma. My God. Like, if Montrose were to spiral and become even more of an alcoholic after this, I wouldn't blame him because you have to bury that. Like, living with that is heavy. That hurts. And black men actually don't have an outlet. So, of course, he's violent, especially during the 1950s. Like, there was no therapy for him to go to. There was no one he could turn to. Like, alcohol and abuse was the only way that he saw because that was what was taught to him by his father and probably his father's father before him. And that's what he imparted to Tick. So it's a cycle that needs to be broken. And I like the fact that Montrose he hasn't broken it yet per se, but the fact that he's realizing like, yo, what I've been doing is wrong. Like, he's trying to come out. He's trying to be happy and free. And I thought that was real inspiring. But after that scene, the racists try to take out Montrose, but thank God they only had one gun. George and Dora come and they get in a fight, and the racist people are beating their asses. And this is the moment that Montrose remembers. Remember in episode 3 or 4 when he was drunk and he was talking about the story about I Got You Kid, and how Tick in the first episode had the vision of Jackie Robinson with the baseball bat that killed the Cthulhu monster. That was the moment we were all waiting for. The story that Montrose passed on to his son was actually a self-fulfilling prophecy because he told Tick the story. Tick then gets a baseball bat, and I'll tell you guys this: the most satisfying baseball swing I have ever seen. Tick takes that bat and smashes those racists, and I'm sitting here like, oh my God, yes, it was beautiful. Tick beats their ass, and then he walks up to Montrose like, I got you, kid. And I was like, Tick inspired his father to inspire himself. It's called the grandfather paradox, and it was great. Like, look up the grandfather paradox in time travel, and you will see why this happens. But at the same time, Letty is trying to find the book of names back at Dora's parents' house, and then Tick's great grandmother shows up, and she confronts Letty. They have a heart-to-heart, and Letty tells her about the fact that she's from the future. She's trying to save her great-grandson's cousin, and they need the book of names. She talks about the birthmark, and then the grandmother realizes, hey, does this mean we don't survive? And Letty's like, you guys don't survive, you guys burned. And the grandmother had a choice to make: doom Tick's existence and the existence of her descendant, or let her legacy go on. And she chose to let her legacy go on, and she stood there and died. She legitimately sacrificed herself to imbue her legacy and make sure her lineage goes on. And that was powerful. That scene as a whole, dying for your future generations, ensuring generational wealth, this is the building block of generational wealth. And she sacrificed herself for her future generation. And man, that was touching. Especially the poem in the background, Catch the Fire by Sonia Sanchez, resonating, added weight to that scene. And by this time the entire city's on fire. We see the bombings, we see the massacre, we see the fighting, we see these white people come out of nowhere and just massacring everybody around. And I'm sitting here like, fuck, man. Every time I watch this, it's tough. If you guys have seen Watchmen, the opening sequence of Watchmen is this. Watching this happen, it really hurt. Like, I hate seeing this happen because they weren't bothering anybody. It was a thriving black community that was bombed, attacked, destroyed, pillaged, robbed, and it's like black people can't have nothing in this country. That's what the message I'm getting across. And I did love the fact that when Tick jumps through the portal to find Hippolyta transforming into the comic book character that Dee drew, like Hippolyta had no more energy, but she had to sustain, she had to overcome, she had to protect Dee. So she pushed herself, and Hippolyta evolved while this was happening. But while that's happening, you see Letty doing that walk, and she's protected from all the fire and all the bombings, and that itself is powerful because she had the book of names. She's carrying the legacy of all that trauma within her, so in a sense it symbolizes her being protected. And Montrose is sitting there speaking names to the people who died, businesses, surgeons, doctors. And remember, this is Lovecraft country. The power of a name is strong, and the fact that Montrose was reciting all their names and letting us know that these people lived, these people mattered, my God, like this is Lovecraft country at its best, and I enjoyed every second of it. But anyway, guys, that's it for episode 9 of Lovecraft country. This was a very powerful episode. I really get into more detail about some of these stuff in the podcast, so definitely check out the podcast, the Magical Negro podcast, in the description box below. But guys, that's it for this video, and until next time, definitely hit that subscribe button, give the video a thumbs up, and my face will be here in the next video because I'm out of town, so I have to do this voiceover narration. But I'll be back in studio next week, guys. Until next time, binge on.